All right, well, we're going to get started. We're going to start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any emergency additions to the agenda?
There are none.
Would anyone like to move to approve our agenda?
I'll move to approve.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Unanimous? So as you all know, we're here to discuss the potential of the sixth grade moving to Matilaha. And the way we scheduled it was for public comments to come at the end, because we thought that would be the most helpful to be able to sort of absorb the information that we all receive and then make comments. However, we understand that some people might not be able to be here for the whole meeting, and some people may just want to make a comment up front. So we're going to allow a minute and a half, which is half our normal amount of public comment if you'd like to come first. But even before that, I believe we do have a brief presentation regarding tomato mania. So we want to start with that. You guys are not limited to the minute and a half.
Hi, I'm Gracie Font, and I'm in 6th grade at Miners Oak School, and this is Bryn Taylor. She's in 2nd grade. We're having a fundraiser called Tomato Mania, and we're selling tomato seedlings. There are 10 types available, and they cost $6 each. You can order now through March 2nd, and they will be able for pickup on
April. It might be on the.
It's the third Wednesday.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the third.
Find it.
Okay. Yeah, third Wednesday of April.
And is there a website or anywhere you can go?
We'll have it up on our Miners Oaks website shortly.
Okay, great.
And are you selling them before and after school, or just through the flyers?
I think we can probably do some days after school, but mostly through flyers probably.
So do you have a
We can
flyer for
actually do
me?
it tonight if you want.
That's what I was hoping.
Fine, right here.
It's
And
funny.
is there a date for the website? So if people, well, we want them to go to the website every day, right? But if they're waiting,
Hopefully she'll have it on there by tomorrow. We'll
Oh,
have the
okay.
link on there.
great.
And there are, I've seen on the Facebook posts, the different types of tomatoes, so that's really fun too. And I know they're doing it, not just at Miners Oaks, I know they're doing it at Topo.
is doing, and I think Mr.
Looks like Miramani is doing it as well.
No, I'm just helping.
I was impressed with. I was like, Teresa, that's very nice. And then I realized now she's a Miners Oak. Well, thanks a lot. Do you guys have
Thank
anything
you.
more?
That's all.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you
Great
very
job.
much.
Thank you.
Excellent work.
Yes, I'd like to sign up for some tomatoes, for sure. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. So based on what I said about the public comments, are there any public comments? Anyone want to start with a public comment, or are you willing to sit it out?
And if they do their minute and a half now, could they do a minute and a half later? Or-
You know what? Let's go into private session. So I think we can move to the regular agenda. So I'll hand it over to Andy.
Sure. So, we brought this topic to the board at our January 17th meeting, asking if the board was interested in taking up this topic again. Just for those in the audience to know, there's been no tentative or otherwise position taken by this board on this topic. But the request was that they did feel this was a time to at least hear the information and whatever updated information that may have come since the committee looked at this topic back in 2014. And so we did have an incredible committee that spent, I believe, 5 sessions looking at all types of different research, having folks come in. And so we actually have pulled a few of our committee members from that 2014 group and wanted to start off the meeting going back and looking a bit more at what they looked at, as well as talking about the ultimate conclusions that the committee arrived at. So that's going to be what we start the evening off with. And then Cheryl, myself, and Javier, principal at Matilaha, and I believe Carol's also going to assist, with answering some other questions of, again, what has changed since 2014 to cause us to really believe that this is the right time to be looking at this topic again. So that's kind of how the evening's going to go. And once that information goes out, we will have, again, many more meetings, I'm sure, on this topic, but we wanted to have the initial information, and especially that 2014 committee report analyzed a little bit more by our representative group from that committee before we did have that public comment and additional questions that you guys might have as an audience. So again, that's how the evening will go. And so we do have 3 members from that committee, actually a few more who I know are in the audience who were either formally members or informally members who were active in the audience. But we have asked Linda Taylor, our former board member, to speak, as well as Christy Thatcher, who is now a Topa teacher, but at the time, I believe, instructional assistant at the time, right? Instructional assistant, but also I think that one of the viewpoints you were coming at from was as a parent as well of children in the district. And then we have Carrie Holden, who's a Matilaha teacher as well. So with that, we'll have Linda go ahead and start, and we've asked her to give a little bit more of an overview as to what took place during the deliberations and the meetings back in 2014.
Hi, everybody. So nice to see you all, and thank you, Shelley, for taking my spot and doing such a great job. I really appreciate it. You're doing a fabulous job as a board member. So, there were, just to let the audience know, the board president and one of the board members and the superintendent has an agenda review meeting before each board meeting, and Hank and myself and a couple of the other board members during it. Actually, I think it was 3 or 4 different agenda review meetings. We discussed the idea of having the 6th graders move to Matilaha because of the incorporation of Common Core and the importance of having science and math skills be really fully developed for the 6th grade students. And Common Core was really our guiding motivation for thinking about the fact that 6th graders might be better off with the 7th and 8th graders with a traditional middle school. And part of it came about because when I was teaching in Massachusetts in the Falmouth School District, I taught in an intermediate school. And it was obviously 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. The 6th graders were on a different floor. It was a 3-story building. They were on one floor, and the 7th and 8th graders on different floors. So everybody was separated academically, but for their electives, which were at the time art, music, home ec, or shop. I'm going to guess the home ec or shop. It was a trimester system. And so the 6th, 7th, 8th graders all came together for their electives. And it worked out very well. And Falmouth was an area very similar to Ojai because we were a small rural area. There were kids that went to school together. They knew each other from childhood. They'd been in sports activities together. So it was really very similar to Ojai, and it worked very well. We had absolutely no problems with the 6th graders being incorporated with the 7th and 8th graders. So that was one motivation, and Hank and I talked about that quite a bit, actually. So we talked about the importance of really being careful in choosing a committee for this very important decision for the district. And we felt that it was important to choose community members and parents, staff members, volunteer board members, which was myself and Ricky, and also to set up a timeline for the meetings so that the meetings could proceed in an orderly fashion, and that would give people in the community, other parents who weren't on the board, an opportunity to come and speak. And we were also really concerned that every member of the committee have different viewpoints, and that we're not all, we weren't all rubber stamping the idea that 6th graders should move in with the middle, create a middle school. And so that we really wanted to hear opinions expressed, respectfully heard, and we also wanted parents and other community members and other staff members who were coming to the meetings to be able to express their opinions and feel like they were really being heard in a respectful way. We didn't have, obviously, the videotaping that we have now, which was too bad because I think that would have been a really excellent, those would have been excellent meetings to videotape. I hope that, I don't know, are those minutes on the web? They are. I think that all of you in the audience, it'd be really beneficial for you to look at all the minutes from those meetings, because you can see the progression of how things took place and how really carefully everybody considered their ideas and their opinions. And for me, I mean, some of the highlights obviously were the sixth grade teachers who came and spoke and talked about what they do at their respective elementary schools. And I have to say, I was so proud to be a member of this school district, because what the sixth grade teachers do is really, so outstanding. And I think we have, everyone is doing such a fantastic job. And of course, at that time, we were still suffering from our economic downturn, and teachers were really hurting and having furlough days and all that sort of stuff. So also the middle school principals from Ventura Unified came and spoke, and that was, listening to them talk and talking about really all the outstanding programs that they were able to do for everybody, I thought was really, really terrific. So that's pretty much all I have. Does anybody have any questions for me?
What do you remember as being highlights of the kinds of programs that you felt could be offered in Ojai versus what we do offer now?
The variety of science programs, I really felt, because they have science labs in the middle schools, and obviously the elementary schools, we don't have the ability to have those, and also the ability for students to be able to take more accelerated math classes without having to change schools. My son, for example, was a very accelerated math student, and he had to come to Matilaha when he was in elementary school, and then he had to go to Nordhoff when he was at Matilaha. So I think that being able to really tailor the programs for students, I think was one of the big important things for me.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions?
I think most people who I've talked to who have been opposed to it have talked about the social and emotional preparedness and exposing kids to things that, they're young, they're our elementary school students. I think that's probably something you discussed in the committee.
Yes.
Your take on that, I think, would be helpful.
Well, first of all, kids watch television. And many of them watch television when their parents aren't home. I think that most of the children know each other from childhood. They know their friends' older brothers and sisters. They know they play sports. The older brothers and sisters come and watch their games. They do a lot of activities together. It's not as if they're going to school with strangers. So I think when you have very large districts where you have huge numbers of students in a school, you might have that issue, but I certainly don't think that is an issue here, just as it wasn't in the Falmouth Intermediate School that I worked at. So I think that, and I also think that our school administration is really very, very careful about making sure that students are well protected and that there's no bullying. As much as possible anyway. I think they really do an outstanding job. So,
Great, thanks.
okay. No?
Thank you, Linda.
Okay.
And we have Christy coming up next.
Hello.
Hello.
I was asked to speak from the perspective of, like you said, from a parent, also a district employee, and also I had shared with Cheryl that when I first was asked about this, my first thoughts were, no way, like you said, I'm not going to send my little sixth grader over to Matilaha with all of those big kids. So, but during the course of the committee, I actually changed my mind. So I'll just start by saying I have 3 boys. 2 of them have graduated from Nordhoff, and my third one is now a sophomore. And so I believe at the time he could have been impacted by this. So, as you said, I was noon duty. I was doing noon duty at San Antonio Elementary, and I was a one-on-one aide. So I was around the elementary students quite a bit, and I love being around them. So I was often out mostly I was out on the yard or in gen ed classrooms with kids. So I got to know them pretty well. During the course of the committee meetings, I learned a lot. I learned that elementary curriculum is written for grades K through 5, and then 6, 7, 8, and then high school, which was an eye-opener to me. I thought, well, if it's written that way, then that kind of makes sense that they be paired that way. So for cohesiveness, it would make sense for those using the same curriculum to be on the same campus, and it would allow for more collaboration among the teachers, and then creating a smoother transition to 7th and 8th grades. Many of our discussions centered around the facts that when our students are attending Matilaha, they're either coming or going. So it's such a short, time there. Their first year begins with angst because they're so nervous about moving on and attending that. And I know a lot of you have kids in the area, and it's so funny because they're so nervous. And within the first week, I always ask them, "How's it going?" "Oh, it's great." I mean, the angst goes away so quickly, but they do have a lot during that 6th grade year before they go. And before they know it, they're comfortable. And then 1 year or 2 years, and they have to go through all that angst again to move on to being freshmen in high school. So I just began to think that that having more time at the Matilaha campus, maybe they would become more invested in the school and not just think of it as a pass-through to, because it's such a short time. They're there and they're gone. Another concern was the maturity of 6th graders. Should they be put with those big 7th and 8th graders? This was something I was particularly concerned with since my youngest could have been affected. This is where my experience as a noon duty supervisor came into play. I began to pay attention to the students with a different lens. The real question to me became, should these big 6th graders be on this campus with these K through 5th graders? I observed that the majority of 6th graders, especially by January, coming into the new year, were definitely mature enough to be on a junior high campus. And especially, I put in here, I observed that the majority of 6th graders, especially by January, are mature enough to be on a junior high campus and even looking for something different. Their body language, verbal language, and cultural interests begin to mature too. Of course, this isn't all of them, but you do notice all of a sudden the 6th graders kind of in their own clumps walking around campus rather than playing on playgrounds or even playing with the little ones. And then the most appealing thing that I learned during our meetings came from Javier Ramirez and Bill Rosen. They explained that if there were more students at Matilaha, they would have more resources to expand on the educational opportunities. As a parent, that was a huge aha moment for me. Like Linda said, just the science alone, to think of the facilities they have at a junior high as opposed to the elementary really struck me. If Matilaha could learning experience for our students, then I definitely would want an extra year of that. And then the areas that we discussed were more electives and more science, and then more resources for struggling as well as advanced students. After attending the meetings and hearing the discussions, I was convinced that having the 6th grade move to Matilaha would be an advantage for our students. I was disappointed when I found out the budget did not allow the move to become possible. Even though my children are now beyond being affected by this decision, I still think it would be a good move.
How about you?
Any
Same
questions?
question that I asked Linda. What stands out for you in terms of the kinds of activities that you think could be offered if we were to go to the?
Well, I would love to see the elective opportunities expanded on. And then again, the struggling, the struggling, more resources for the at-risk students, and then the advanced students maybe to have, like, also what Linda mentioned, going to the 6th graders that have to travel to miss a couple hours of their morning by traveling to the high school or the junior high. I know that wouldn't prevent the high school, but having to travel to Matilaha to get the higher level math. So those are the ones that strike me as being very beneficial. Is that it?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, I want to first say, when I first heard of this committee, it was like this was tailor-made for me. Sorry, I'm a little sick. I was a 6th grade teacher at Miramani prior to becoming an 8th grade teacher at Matilaha, and also social studies chair. So wearing those two hats, I came into it asking a couple of questions, and really what motivated me to be part of the committee was I was looking and wondering, like, why, if all across California, they've gone to a middle school model, and really all across the United States. Why is Ojai still hanging on to the junior high 7th and 8th grade model? So that's really what motivated me to join. And as I sat on the committee, I kind of went in with an open mind. I hadn't made up my mind yet, really. And as we went through the discussion, a lot of the things that these ladies have already mentioned really, really struck home to me. Of course, being a social studies teacher, I saw the absolute benefit of having 6th graders at Matoha. We learned in our committee, one kind of example stands out in particular, that we were talking about social studies, and somebody said, well, we teach ancient history in 4th grade at Summit, and we teach it in 6th grade at Miramani, and we teach it 2 days a week here and 5 days a week here. And so there was just such a big mix of amount of curriculum that was being taught, and it wasn't very standardized across the district. And now with the new frameworks and the new content standards, I thought, wow, what an incredible opportunity for our students academically to be presented with information that kind of goes. And just having reviewed recently the new frameworks in social studies, really we are starting in history, especially like 8th grade history, with the foundation that they've absolutely learned things in elementary school. And through discussions with my department, especially the two who teach 7th grade, they say like a lot of their 7th grade year is spent teaching procedures and how to do things and, and getting kids up to speed, so they're all kind of on the same page. And so when I heard, wow, we could have the opportunity to have 6th grade here and make sure that we, are all exposed to the same curriculum. And so that was one huge advantage. And then the other advantage was actually something Cheryl came and talked to our school about just a couple of weeks ago, and one of her presentations really hit home, which was teacher collaboration. I was really, really motivated by your talk, and I thought, wow, how great would it be to have our 6th grade, there. We have all of the 6th grade teachers in one spot, able to communicate with 7th and 8th graders, and not just, once a trimester at a district in-service, but we could be meeting there on a weekly basis and really collaborating and coming up with some incredible options. And I loved how you said, the standards, and maybe one teacher teaches it really well, and you're, well, what'd you do? Tell us, how'd you get your kids to that level? And so I think for me, that was just an incredible, wow, we could be able to do that if the 6th graders moved. And so that comes to my second question. Well, why haven't we done it? And so the very last meeting, we had a huge discussion, and everybody came to really a consensus, for the most part, that this was a really, really incredible idea. And we were all, this research-based really makes sense for our students. But then Hank asked us to do the next step. He said, okay, now I want you all to respond to this question. If you have $150,000 that it's going to cost for us to move the students to Matoha, will you put that as the top priority over teacher salaries, over class size reduction? And everybody on the committee said no. It's just at the time, the timing was not there. We were 10 years of teachers not having a raise, furlough days, and at that point, really it didn't make political sense as far as morale and teachers to say, hey, we're investing in this new program. Well, you guys are still, at the bottom of the barrel as far as salaries and even cutting our work days. So, in my opinion, as I teach history, timing is everything, and the time was not right at that point. So, but I really feel strongly that it would be a fabulous move and a great academic benefit for the students of the Ojai Valley. You have any questions for me?
I have a question. I guess this could go to any of you who are on that committee. I remember going to maybe a couple meetings, and the thing I don't really know is, did you always envision the 6th grade being incorporated in a certain way, or were the different potentials also discussed? Like,
Yeah,
does-
we did, and we said that, decision number one is to figure out, is it a good move? And then decision number two is, how is that model going to look? And at that time, we didn't spend too much time talking about the actual model of what it would look like. Bill Rosen had come from his school, and he gave some ideas as far as having more of like a sixth grade model where they change classes, but it's more like they do have one teacher for like English and history, and then another for math and science. So they're rotating, but in a more limited environment. And we threw around ideas like having them separate lunches and, or separate areas. How could we create kind of a safe niche for them? But we didn't really spend too much time looking into the nitty gritty. And I was under the impression that that would happen once the board reached the decision that that was a good thing to do and move forward, and then we could take a year or so and plan what would be the best model.
'Cause I assume there are places where the sixth graders are just general population, and they just have the same kind of experiences as everybody.
Yeah.
But it does sound, it's always sounded to me when we've talked about it in OI like it was gonna be a hybrid program, like where they were, like you just described.
There was an example, I have some stuff from some of those committees, there was, and I feel like it was fairly local, a school that switched in 2004 or 5, and the first 3 years, they kept the sixth graders in this wing, and they had separate lunches, and they found by the third, maybe fourth year, I think everyone had gone, okay, it
Okay,
is
it's good,
okay,
yeah.
my kids are safe. And so then they combined their lunches.
Yeah.
And then the next year they added so that's a model too, to just sort of say, hey, at the beginning, we wanna make sure that, I know Bill had talked about the wings, rooms 17 through 22, and then they would go out the back side for their snack rather than the front side, or, lots of options, but, yeah, I think.
And I
there's-
think,
We talked about that,
Yeah.
with Bill.
Different
Bill and I
models.
discussed
Yeah.
specifically physically what would it look like? What would the sixth graders be? Where would we put them? So those options were discussed as part of it, and I think, Jane, you're right on it, that we talked about the possibility of maybe, school within a school,
Right.
and then, taking baby steps into eventually integrating everybody to the general population.
Baby steps is kind of an interesting idea, because then, I think as a parent, because I had both, kids go through Matilah too, that it might be an easier sell to the community as, that we're gonna transition them instead of just
Right.
throw them in.
Robin, you were gonna say something?
It seems like, I was on the sixth grade committee, and I remember same kind of feeling hesitant and then moving towards that direction academically and socially, emotionally, feeling like it's very appropriate for sixth graders. And I think part of what we talked a lot about having that block scheduling was so that should our sixth grade teachers move over, they could still use their multiple subject credential rather than layoffs across the board for teachers in the elementary positions. Which was in that time, was one of my main concerns as a sixth grade teacher, was that it wasn't gonna be.
Right.
And actually, that was gonna be my next question, since you were a sixth grade teacher, then talk to me about single subject versus multi-subject and how that
Just the
works.
difference?
Yeah.
Well, I think for me, it's mainly a time issue. When I taught sixth grade, obviously social studies and history is my passion, and I taught with Kent Houston, which was fabulous, and he was a science guy and I was the history, teacher, but we could only squeeze it in till 3 days a week. And so now, if at sixth grade, they get 52 minutes every single day as opposed to, just 45 minutes. We did it 3 days a week, and we thought we were pretty successful in that. And,
I
but
don't think it's happening across the district every day in sixth
yeah,
grade.
I don't think so either. And so to me, that's a huge, detriment, because.
But you, as a teacher, were able to make the transition because you had a different, did you have to go back for credential?
That's it, yeah, that's an interesting question. So I have a multiple subject credential, but I was a history major, so I just had to apply for a supplemental credential in history. But I think that is, you're right, that was.
It's changed now, you'd have to take the, CSEC, I think, in history.
Oh, thank heavens.
Or whatever your single
I'm old.
subject is, you can't just have your supplemental credential to be
Mhm.
full credential.
I think that's an
Or an
important
additional.
topic, though. We need to consider what happens to the
What kind of
teacher.
credentialing?
Well,
Mhm.
but interestingly enough, I'm wondering if that extra credentialing is actually a positive. I mean, as long as we provide teachers with,
And I
you know,
have to,
access or ability, then isn't that making them better teachers for the students, or?
and it
Am
is
I making a weird
interesting to
assumption?
have an elementary background going to teaching 8th grade. I do use a lot of my elementary techniques as far as trying to be really hands-on and make history come alive. And, you know, I do rely on a lot of project-based learning and things like that that I think is really heavy in the elementary, but I think is really successful with 8th graders as well.
Adults too.
Yeah. Works, right?
It may be something where we really have to get into the details of what teachers do we have and what are their
Certainly.
credentials and how easy would it be for each one and what do they want to do?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You might have people who are sixth grade teachers that you want them to get a supplemental or a extra credential,
Mhm.
but they may already be in a master's degree program or something, you know, it's like trying to figure out that time-wise would be.
Or you might have some 6th grade teachers that wouldn't mind going to 5th grade and a
Right.
5th grader
Wanna
teacher
go.
that wants to come, you know.
Exactly.
Try something new and,
Yeah. Or even like a fifth grade teacher,
Mhm.
wanting to be single subject.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an opportunity.
Sure.
So you can't teach right now in 6th grade with a single subject?
With a multiple subject?
you have to have a
With a single,
multiple,
like right now, right, you'd have to, if you have a single subject, you have to be at the junior high or the high school.
yeah.
Correct, right.
But
Right.
vice versa too, right? If you
But
have
I-
the,
Unless
Mul-
it's self-contained
I
in
think
junior
you
high.
can, yeah, I think at the junior high, if you have a group of classes, if you're social studies and English, you can go with a multiple
Multiple
subject
subject.
credential, right?
And
Yeah,
continue,
the
elementary
elementary
teachers have a
That's
self-contained
right.
credential, so if they teach all subjects, then they're good at junior high.
Let's call Jody.
Another Jody
My
question.
daughter on.
Remember what I said, when in doubt, go to-
Right, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I think we're gonna turn to the PowerPoint. I'm gonna come over here so I can see it. So a lot of what I'm gonna talk about, they've already touched on, but just with a little bit more detail in the PowerPoint. So of course, in 2010, our state did adopt the Common Core State Standards, which sounds like was the impetus for this discussion to happen. And it's important to note that when they were creating the Common Core State Standards, they certainly envisioned that K through 5th grade is typically taught by multiple subject teachers, and 6th through 12th grade is typically single subject credentialed teachers. So I found this interesting. It's kind of a way to illustrate it. As you look at, one of the big shifts in Common Core was a shift toward reading and informational text, not just literary text. And as students go up in the grades, there are specific reading or language arts standards that are meant to be taught in like history class or in science class, and that's how they intended it, which is what this describes. As the content becomes more complex in history and science, and the teachers, and there's an expectation for the teachers to have an understanding of reading and writing standards and how they specifically apply to those pieces of informational text. That's a very it's a narrow specialty, right? You have to really think about that and do that diligently. It can't be something that's just the added thing on top, which is kind of what we see when you look at the way history and science are taught in elementary school. They're kind of the extra things that you get to a few times a week, right? So, but there are very specific standards that need to be addressed. There are language arts standards in those informational texts and in those classes. So, next slide. With mathematics, it becomes very important to look at how they grouped the certain concepts through Common Core State Standards. You can see that K through 2 connect, and when we talk about collaboration in a second, and I'm glad you guys brought it up as well, you can see how the concepts that are happening in K through 2nd grade, you would expect those teachers to talk to each other, collaborate, and work together. And then you see that 3rd through 5th are obviously grouped together with the concepts there. 6th, 7th, and 8th are a little bit more standalone, but you can see how 6th and 7th grade do correlate, right? And so there would be opportunities for people to certainly collaborate on topics, but also really important that they're able to vertically align, right? What did you cover in sixth grade? Because it's going to really be important that they master certain concepts so they can master other concepts as they get to seventh grade. Yeah. So we were pretty lucky when we went to adopt our language arts curriculum. We found Houghton Mifflin, and we really liked it. So I say we're lucky because it had a K through sixth grade component. So in our elementary schools currently, we do have a language arts curriculum where all the teachers, TK through sixth grade, are able to work out of a program that was developed by one publisher, one company.
Could I stop you there?
Yeah.
Have we thought about, as we monetize the switch, would this be an additional cost if we had to switch over to a different curriculum in ELA?
No, not necessarily, and they wouldn't have to get rid of the curriculum they have for sixth grade. And I would say that generally speaking in the language arts curriculum, the standards are the most closely aligned from grade level to grade level, so I think it'd be a relatively easy switch. Where you see it be really difficult is in math, science, and history, which I'll show you in a second. So I think that the benefits far outweigh the costs of potentially having a different ELA curriculum. So I think, yeah, this slide. So what we found when we went to pilot math and look at math programs is that it was very challenging to find a K through sixth grade curriculum in math that we all liked. And so we ended up sacrificing a little bit. We adopted Bridges, which is a K through fifth grade program, and then our sixth grade teachers who are currently on the elementary campuses chose to pick CMP3, which the seventh and eighth grade teachers were already using for math. And so that puts them at a real disadvantage, though, because when do they have time to collaborate, right? Sixth grade teachers, they're using the same curriculum as the seventh and eighth grade teachers at Matilla, but they don't ever have time to talk about that. And what's even harder is that it's very difficult to learn a curriculum. There are pieces to curriculum. I mean, they're huge, right? Like this boxes and boxes for one teacher, and you've got your sort of your main book that you look at, but then you've got all these different supplemental materials. And then in the book, you know that as you get familiar with the curriculum, you know that on the first page of each unit, there's a yellow box, and that's how you support English learners. And then there's a box over here, and here's what you do to support advanced, students. And so to be able to work out of CMP3 easily and Bridges easily, you'd have to learn two totally different curricula because they're not the same where all those supports are. And so it's a very difficult experience to get familiar. I would say it takes a year or two to get familiar with just one set of curriculum with all that it comes with for supports.
And Cheryl,
yeah.
How many fifth, sixth teachers do we have right now that are juggling both of those?
Well, so it became an added cost to our district because when we adopted math for elementary, we said that we would not make any 5-6 combination teacher teach both at the same time. So we actually send in a support teacher for the math section, and it's an additional cost. So. So that's the math problem. Then we're in the process right now, we're about to go to a publisher's fair to look at history and social science curriculum for the district. So if you'll click on that link now, Javier. So what happens is the State Board of Education adopts curriculum, and then we use that as our list to choose from. And what you'll see here is that you'll see a lot of K-5, K through fifth grade. So this is the list of the possibilities for us to choose, and are there any that are K through 6?
Yes.
One or two?
There's two.
So you see we're going to be in the same predicament where when we go to adopt, it's going to be practically impossible to find a social studies curriculum that's going to be K through sixth grade, right? Because we only have one option. So it's likely that the same thing is going to happen again where we have to be stuck with two different curricula for our elementary school in order to get our K through fifth grade curriculum and then our sixth graders curriculum. Questions about that? You see it? I know it's hard to see, but hopefully that helps. And then the last thing is science. We are not in a position yet to adopt science materials. The state board hasn't even approved any materials at this point, but that'll be the next step. But what's interesting is you can see again, this is on our CDE website. You can see if you'll scroll, can you scroll down, Javier? You can see again how they're grouped, right? Kindergarten through fifth grade, and then 6th through 8th grade. And one of the important parts, if you'll keep rolling down, is when we get to 6th grade and beyond, you have an option to teach by the topic, like earth science, life science, and physical science. But as we get coached and we have more training, we've decided that we want to do the integrated model. Okay, so that means that you teach from each of those three things in 6th grade, in 7th grade, and in 8th grade. And it's super important that those teachers can talk and collaborate together to make sure that the right things are being hit in 6th grade, because they build on each other in 7th grade and then in 8th grade. So it's not discrete individual concepts at each grade level. So
And why do you like that model versus?
because they're not discrete independent things. And so when you teach by unit where those things interrelate, there's a deeper understanding and a deeper connection for students.
It's kind of like the same reason why the math, we decided to go with the CMP3 model, and at the high school we decided to go with the integrated model.
Right.
So right now, we had a conversation about, it used to be secluded, you have geometry here, algebra here, algebra 2 trig. But the high school decided to go with the integrated model for the
Right.
exact same reason.
Exactly.
I remember 'cause the
Yeah.
students sort of saying, well, you just have to accept that. You'll learn why next year.
Exactly.
But just accept it right now and we'll learn the rest, you
That's
know,
right.
versus
Yeah,
just.
there you go. And
That's
our
right.
CMP3 curriculum at the junior high uses the same model, which is more integrated.
Yeah. Okay, so back to the PowerPoint. We just wanted to show you the CDU website and some of the things that we're looking at as we make decisions. So thank you, Carrie, for letting everybody know that you liked when I came to talk to the staff. And so as the board does know, I have been talking to our teachers about the importance of collaboration. We've been looking at the basically the top researchers. These people are among the top names: John Hattie, Robert Marzano, Richard Dufour. They go out and they research what's great in schools, what's working, what is having the maximum student outcomes for mastery of standards. And what they continuously all say is that we need to identify essential standards. We need to be using formative assessments to check periodically how the kids are doing at mastering those standards. And we need to come together into teams, PLCs, right, professional learning communities, and have those conversations like, oh my gosh, your kids did great on that, and my kids really bombed that, so what'd you do? And that's where the expertise really lies among our teaching staff. They are experts, they have lots of experience, and they need to be there to help each other to figure things out, because the answer's not always clear. It's like, what happened to this kid? How did he miss it? Oh, look, he did, this step was, use this model that I used. I bet he'll figure it out when you show him, show it to him that way, right? So that's the kind of conversations you want to have teachers having on a regular basis. And when it comes to both the standards being so connected, 6 through 8, and then the curriculum options being organized that way, for our teachers to be able to have that kind of good collaborative interactions, we're going to need them on the same campus together, at least for them to be able to do it frequently anyways. So then there's lots of educational benefits, which many of them were mentioned today, but I put the ones that I pulled out of the notes and what we could remember on this PowerPoint. So one thing that was mentioned is access to leveled classes. So in like our bigger elementaries like Topa, there's been times when, for example, in 6th grade, they do divvy out the kids and there's more of an advanced math and a slower paced math. But indeed, some of the kids do get sent to Matilaha on a bus. This is very disjointed. They tend to miss material when they're not on the elementary campus. So there is some leveling that can happen, but not in the smaller schools. When you only have one teacher, it's very difficult to then offer that kind of differentiation as programs to the students. So if all 6th graders were together, you'd really be able to do that. You'd be able to level out the programs and differentiate for the students. Individual course sections for resource or special education students, and also intervention classes, they also work better, especially at the higher grades when you have periods, because, for example, it's really easy to pull kids out who need reading support, for example, when what they're missing in their class is reading, right? Reading instruction, which is what happens at the lower grades. But it's really hard to pull kids out for reading support when they're missing 6th grade, English class, where they're actually reading some sort of written work that they need to understand and have those concepts. So they start to miss things when they're pulled out, which tends to be the model for intervention and for resource in elementary. So at the middle school level, you can actually go to a class while another class is happening and you're not missing that other class, right? So everybody goes to different periods. So those become potential options to support those students.
And are you saying basically like support, students who are needing support from the 5 elementaries, when you pull them all together, it actually creates a class, a group?
Basically, yes. So, but what I mean is, like, when you have, if you're in resource and you need a special English class, right, because your disability prevents you to be able to keep up to speed with a regular English class, you can go to an English period that's your special education period, and you're not missing something else, because that's what happens in elementary school. When you go out to get your English support, you're missing something that you need that's going on in the classroom because the timelines don't sync up like you do when you have periods. First period, second period, it's all blocked out. So the kids miss things when they go to resource sometimes, and they miss things when they go to intervention where that wouldn't happen if it's actually a discrete period that they're going to. Does that make sense? So we would get to eliminate 5th and 6th grade combination classes, which would be a good thing.
Can I ask a question about that? And maybe this is the Common Core math. Like, the reason we have the 5th and 6th combination classes isn't just because there are 6th grade students in the elementary school, right? It's because there are shortages in the 5th grade too.
Right.
And so what happens to the elementary schools if we're not having those 5th and 6th combos?
It wouldn't
Then
affect,
we're having 5th and 4th combos and 4th and 3rd.
but that's happening
But
already.
they have the same curriculum, 6th grade doesn't.
That's the
Right.
point.
That's the point,
Yeah.
to teach.
Right.
So 5th down, if you have a 5-4, you still have the same curriculum, where 5th and 6th grade combo teachers don't. They have 2 different curriculums.
Right.
And even if you think back to like the way the math was grouped that I showed you, like if you're a 4th, 5th grade teacher trying to teach those 2 grade levels math, you're at least teaching them concepts that are connected. There's
No,
overlap.
all of that makes
Yeah.
sense to me. It's the math of the getting rid of the 5th, 6th combos, because
It doesn't-
it seems like maybe we shouldn't have the 5th, 6th combos now.
Right. That would be nice, but yeah. But certainly taking the 5th, 6th combination away doesn't change any other combinations. Those are all gonna still have to happen if there's not the right number of students to make individual classes.
Right, it's just we have more 5th graders who are extra.
Yeah,
Right.
they'd
I
go
mean,
with a 4th grade class. They'd be
The math, the math still doesn't work, right? The combinations would have to be
You'd still have to have combinations.
totally realigned.
The only problem is the 5th, 6th combination is particularly difficult because of the things we just mentioned.
Right.
So, yeah. Of course, they'd have access to electives, which would be great for our 6th graders, and I definitely think that at that age they definitely would benefit from that. They'd have individual PE, science, and social studies daily. This is a big deal. So in elementary, they don't get PE daily either. And certainly the benefit of having a school site where you actually have science labs. That's another very difficult thing when we're adopting science curriculum, is the way the curriculum comes, it's expected, there's all these things that you need to be able to set up, and there's an expectation that there's a lab there. So that's another piece when we go to adopt curriculum, is we have to try to pick curriculum that's been made with the idea in mind that it's going to be a multiple subject teacher who teaches different subjects throughout the day, because they don't have time to go set up a science experiment when they just finished teaching math and then they have to turn around and teach history, right? So it's
So let me
very
ask, I
difficult.
mean, this might not have been figured out yet, but I know one of the things that the elementary, during the single plans, and we were talking about things, is the Common Core requirements now in ELA and math have like, instead of, we can't do math in 50 minutes anymore. It's now
Right.
taking an hour and a half. So that's why science and social studies are not available daily, is because they're doing all these other things. So how does the model at the 6th grade, at the middle school, fit those things in differently?
The middle school person, how do you fit 52 minutes, how do you fit a lesson in math in 52 minutes when they get 90 minutes at the elementary level? That's what you're asking. I would say it's not easy. But I would say that what helps them is the fact that they do have some leveled courses. So you can pace your class different and move to the speed of your class if you have an advanced class who's picking up the concept faster, right? and they can move forward. And then you have classes that you might go a little slower, you might not cover as much content, but the mastery of that content and the time dedicated to those conversations that have to happen and the written explanations of explaining my thinking have to happen. But you can actually provide for that pacing a little bit better because you potentially have the option to have your groups split out with the leveling. But there's no good answer. 52 minutes is not enough time, and I think that anybody teaching CMP3 math would say that 52 minutes is a challenge.
But it is 52 minutes every single day.
Right.
Well, we definitely teach math every single day in elementary, but yes, I mean.
And if I could argue against myself again, if you don't have a 5th-6th combo, maybe it is easier.
Well, they're being taught that separate. So, I mean, there's a different
Yeah.
teacher.
But they have to take the time to split out.
There's those kind of transitions.
Logistics.
So, and then access to athletics. So we know that Matilla has after school athletics, which I know Javier will talk to a little bit more about that, but that's nice for them to have that access. And then certainly there are a lot more clubs available. I think most of us just have like leadership. The other ones at elementary. Food for thought, but that's more our educational process that happens during the day. But they have 5 or 6 and could have more with the more students they have. I think that's
Do you envision a JV and varsity on sports? So would that be a problem for 6th graders who would otherwise have a great athletic experience as a 6th grader, but not be able to make a team as a?
Well, that's what we currently have in basketball. We have this year we have 3 boys teams and 3 girls teams. And we decided to call them the varsity and the JV1, JV2. I know there's no varsity here. But that's how we differentiate between them. But we do those things, and they actually play in different leagues. So as you know, the varsity team plays in the regular county league with all the middle schools, and our JV teams play in the officer rec league. So less competitive league, and it's just a great progression. You go to that league before you actually go to the check.
And hasn't it happened that there are other schools that we play against that have a 6th grade team and we have nobody for them to play?
Right.
So they don't.
He's going to tell some of those stories in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
I think, is the next slide your slide?
I think it's mine.
Oh, yours, sorry.
Well, it raises another question I want, because there's the flag football through the park and rec that's based on schools at the elementary level. How does that?
No, it's part of the junior high too. Are you talking about?
No, that's Eagles.
Oh, Eagles. Got it.
You know, one year they also had flag football 7th and 8th grade, and they just did the lottery the way they do for basketball. So they would just have to change their model for 6th grade.
Or they could just pick teams and it wouldn't be school-based.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what you said, right?
Yes.
Any other questions for my slides? Okay, thank you.
All right, so I have a few slides, and Javier, if you don't mind. Oh, do you have a clicker now? And just so you know, if you're working off of the hard copies that were mailed out to some last week or what was on the website, these next few slides were not ready for press last week, and so they are new. We have hard copies in the back, and obviously they'll be right here. So again, just to recap of the past 45, 55 minutes, we had a 20-person committee that we heard 3 great summaries of the process and factors that played into each of the committee members' recommendations. We heard from Cheryl even more information as far as in 2014 we knew CMP3 had been adopted, but at that point had not yet actually fully adopted any of our curriculum at our site level. And so now that we have adopted ELA and math and are making progress toward the others, again, more information that you certainly heard from Cheryl as far as the curricular impact. So obviously the big piece that in 2014 kind of stalled discussions was the financial piece, and so that's what we want to spend a little bit of time talking about here. So just to review, something we heard that again was factored in back in 2014 was that at that point we had furlough days in the 14-15 school year. That was our final year where we had furlough days. Just as a reminder, our teachers took a total of 40 furlough days during a 5-year span. Classified staff took many as well. But again, when the committee was meeting, we still were very deep in the furlough day era. But this is now our 3rd school year, and we project our next 2 school years as well to be full 184-day teacher contracts, 181-day classified contracts. We have had 2 salary increases for teachers. That was 2.5% on the salary schedule, 1.5% off, and then a 4% salary schedule last year. 4% on salary schedule increase last year. Classified had a slightly different structure to their salary enhancement, but they also have received 2 salary enhancements over the past few years. And at the elementary level, we do have our lowest class sizes in a decade. At Matilaha and Nordhoff, they're slightly larger, but still, again, much better than at our peaks, certainly. So what we've been able to accomplish the past few years has been, again, a full instructional calendar, some level of salary enhancement, and some reduction in class sizes. However, I do want to be very clear with our challenges. Even though we've had a few salary enhancements, our staff is still among the lowest compensated in the county. We by no means have solved the many sacrifices that they made over that decade by simply restoring the furlough days and 2 small salary enhancements, but nonetheless they did take place. Also, we do have it looking into next year and the year following. We are still looking at structural deficits in our budget as a result of declining enrollment. Now, we right now have the largest ending fund balance, the largest reserve in our district that we've had in about a decade as well. So we have a very healthy ending fund balance. It's going to help us reduce the full impact of these deficits. And then what we've really been able to do the past few years has been able to bridge the deficit by one-time funding. And sure enough, Governor came out last month with his January proposal for next year to provide about $750,000 in one-time funding. That by itself nearly solves our structural deficit for next year. So we keep buying ourselves 1 year of time to be able to continue to make the adjustments across the district by this one-time funding. But as you guys know, Governor Brown terms out this year. Our economy, we're past couple weeks have begun seeing a little bit more of a shaky stock market. We certainly don't know now, and I believe we're officially the 3rd longest period of economic growth that the country's had since the Great Depression. So we know that we are not too far from a recession. So we don't know how many more years we will have that one-time funding that's able to help us bridge this deficit. So in the meantime, we do still need to make choices coming up that will help us bridge that deficit. Okay, so summary from that slide. Certainly we're in a much improved place from where we were in 2014, but we also are not in incredible fiscal prosperity. Some of the special costs currently associated with having 6th grade at the elementary schools, this would be direct savings potentially. We currently, as we've talked about, in combination classes for 5th, 6th combos, we provide a separate hourly certificated teacher to provide instruction to either the 5th or the 6th grade, so that way we're able to separate them out. This year that's taking place at 3 of our elementaries, Summit, San Antonio, and Miners Oaks. Total cost for that initiative is about $25,000 for the school year. Now, this is the first year that we've offered the 6th grade additional hourly support at Summit. What took place last year was actually the 6th grade, 2 years ago, was the 6th graders actually needed to be bused down to San Antonio to receive their math instruction there. We have not made a decision yet for next year or the years following whether or not we will be able to continue to offer the 6th grade hourly support at Summit. It is possible, depending on the class sizes, of having to have them on a van back down to San Antonio.
And that was a cheaper option, the van down to San Antonio?
Correct. The van to San Antonio is cheaper, but when we have 12 or 13 students like we did this year, we felt that the better academic impact was to keep them there and to not have them missing out. Missing out on instruction because of the travel time.
And
So
they actually started the day at San Antonio. They weren't bused to San Antonio. Parents brought them there. They were only taken by bus up.
This similarly to Matilaha, when the 6th graders went to Matilaha. Okay.
Yes.
The fact that TOPA's not among those getting the 6th grade math support, that means they don't have 5th, 6th combos
That's correct.
at TOPA?
This year we have 3 standalone 6th grade classes.
Thanks.
However, in the past, we have had certainly 5th, 6th combos. In fact, just last year we had 5th, 6th with Mr. Rondo.
My daughter was in one.
So 6th grade also right now at San Antonio is receiving additional support, combination support for ELA. And so that, between the math and ELA support directly for 6th grade, we're looking at about $30,000 a year cost. That works out to be about the same cost as 2 sections. A rough rule of thumb for the middle school and high school is that each section is about $15,000. So theoretically, the savings that would come from no longer offering the support would allow 2 additional sections of either elective offerings or additional concentrated support at the middle school. An additional cost, although not significant, but wanted to be sure we included it, is the transportation cost for the 6th graders who do have advanced math at Matilaha. And then music and PE cost possibly could be absorbed into current staffing at Matilaha, resulting in savings at the elementary schools and keeping Matilaha faculty whole. And that point, I'm going to try to drive home a little bit more with the next couple slides. So again, in 2014, Hank brought to the group that a potential move to Matilaha would actually cost $150,000, and that was going to be a new expense for the district. And that was why they were looking at, if we have a new expense, is it going to be going here, or is it going to be going to any of the other many priorities that we have? I believe strongly that when you look at our enrollment, both now as well as into the future, that we really are not looking at anything near $150,000 new expense. What you're looking at instead is potentially the lost opportunity of savings. So what that means, again, we'll show you in a slide, but first I want to show you why that would take place. And that's using our enrollment projection. So in 2017-18, that's our green slide, or green column here. You can see our district as a whole is 2,446 students. Matilaha this year, back in October, they're actually a little bit smaller now, but in October they were 412 students. And what's really important is to look at the actual grade cohorts, because what we're going to do is go up and look at the elementary cohorts in a moment. But you'll see that we have 186 7th graders, 226 8th graders. Okay. Now, Thane will be the first to remind me of how valuable enrollment projections are going out into the future. And I will agree.
Early grades.
Right, exactly.
But once we have the kids in school,
precisely,
then they're pretty accurate. And if you want to look at cohorts, sorry to interrupt.
No, by all means.
It took me a minute to remember how to track this down, but you can go diagonally. And if you're wondering why are there jumps when you go down vertically, if you go down diagonally, you'll see what's going on.
That's
for the people at home.
Okay. Thank you. So that's exactly right, and that's where I was going to go, is that an enrollment projection, I'll be the first to say, is very shaky when you're trying to project out enrollment projections at the kindergarten level once we start going out a couple of years. In fact, we, in 2015, as a school district, hired the most reputable, it was a good firm that we used, consulting firm, to do an enrollment projection and facility analysis for the elementary school configuration conversation. And so that firm, again, was not a fly-by-night company. They were reputable. Their projection for this current school year's kindergarten was 218 students. If you see where we ended up, 158. It's because they were trying to do a projection based on birth rates in 2012 and analyzing the correlation between birth rates in 2012 and how many of those kids end up matriculating into elementary school 5-6 years later. Obviously, there's the reality that many students who are born in Ojai may move away in the 6-year span that takes place between their birth and potential matriculation. Some go to other schools, not Ojai Unified. Obviously, we have some students come in. But they were able to develop an analysis or a regression analysis that projected out into the future what our enrollment would look like. And it was just dead wrong.
If I could add, it's really hard to get data because no one is born in Ojai at the hospital.
Yeah, that's right.
The only kids born in Ojai are born at home, so.
Right. So they were very wrong. So again, for those who have been paying attention from our elementary school discussion or our when this committee came together 3.5 years ago, we were looking at a very different enrollment picture for our district. In fact, again, those who recall the elementary configuration conversation around enrollment, we really were looking at our district likely having hit our lowest part of the valley last year or this year, and believing that we were really going to level out as a district of 2,500 students going to the future. That was what the Delinka group projected. You'll see I'm projecting something very different. And again, I'll be the first to say that the vulnerability in this projection is not at the middle school level, it's at the kindergarten level. And so if you see The kindergarten, we actually just hold it constant at 163 for each future year. So in 1819, I'm putting 163. In 1920, 163. In 2020, I assure you that's wrong. That's not correct. I just hope it's close. And I believe it is likely to be, because what I'm looking at is really the trend. If you look at our current year, that green column, you'll see that from kindergarten all the way up to fourth grade, our class cohorts look very, very similar. For 5 straight years, we've had an average of 161 students with a very minimal, a tight deviation from that mean. So I believe, without any other reason to evidence to the contrary, that our district is likely going to be continuing to see cohort sizes in that 160 student range. There's nothing that has significantly changed locally as far as housing development or new commercial opportunities that would suggest that what we've now seen a 5-year trend showing is going to significantly change. Obviously, if it did change, then that might change this projection 10, 15 years out, because obviously they have to age through. But we believe that we're looking at our future as a district as 160 student cohorts. And so if you now look at that very bottom line of of this projection, you'll see we go from 2446 down actually to being a district of 2,200 students in just a few years. And that even in itself will not be the full decline. So we are uncertain about enrollment at the kindergarten level, but
Let me interrupt. What do you mean that won't be the full decline?
we will still, because if you look at the
If you take the 163 all the way through,
exactly.
that's averaging a little higher, isn't it?
Precisely.
Yeah.
I just stopped at 2022 for the sake of
Because
having
you
5
ran out of
years.
paper.
Exactly, having 5 years on each side of this current school year. But yeah, we would be looking at the possibility of still having some, that junior class in that year would be.
Yeah.
So again, the kindergarten enrollment, speculative, but it's a educated speculation. The other levels we're highly confident in. We have extreme precision on projecting our enrollment into the out years on anything beyond kindergarten, because the reality is that somewhere between 98 and 101% of students that are first graders this year are going to become second graders next year. And they're going to become third graders the year after. And so we have a statistical formula based on the trend history of exactly where we see some blips, and we occasionally see blips between third and fourth grade. We know the story behind that is probably Monica Ross students who are coming into likely San Antonio or Topa, and we see at 8th grade to 9th grade we actually see the biggest drop there. That's about a 92% cohort survival rate, we call it. And that's because we know that after 8th grade from Matilaha, we do have students who go to Villanova. We have a few that go to Thatcher. Some might drive down the hill, go to one of the Ventura schools. So we actually have a very high degree of confidence in the K through 12 projections once they're actually in our district. And so that's why we feel very confident in the projections for Matilaha going out for the foreseeable future. We are looking at a decline of about 15 students for next year. It's holding steady, maybe a slight uptick the year following, and then really seeing some significant declines in 2021 based on what is currently this year's 4th grade cohort. Again, that first year where we see that trend of 160s, the school will drop by 50 students that year, going down to 364. And eventually will settle as a site right now without a change of being a site of about 320 students. Again, that's a simple 160 student cohorts times 2 gets you to be about a 320, 325 student school. Okay, so that's the enrollment picture going forward, and that is something that we have 3 additional years of enrollment data at the kindergarten level since this committee met back in 2014, and certainly changes our outlook as a district. So here's one important piece as we look at what changes, and Javier is going to be the one to talk about this a little bit more as to what it really would feel like and look like at the campus. But what I want to emphasize, the financial cost of declining enrollment. Unlike in many other states, California is funded on a per student basis coming to us from the state. Other states, and I frequently when I'm going around speaking to groups in this community, there's still a misconception. They believe that all of our revenue is coming from local property taxes, and may perceive that we just get a set amount of money, and hey, a few fewer students means more money to go around for those remaining. That's not how it works in California for the majority of districts. A few very wealthy districts have that exact funding mechanism. It's called basic aid, but we certainly are not a basic aid district.
And do we know at what point, how low we would have to go in our enrollment before we could become basic aid?
Right now,
Is
we
there-
get only about 55% of our revenue from local
Oh,
property
okay.
taxes, so it'd have
So
to be
It'd have to be a lot.
drastic.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or what would really help us would be simply more homes turning over, because the big issue for us is Prop 13 locks in a home
Right.
value, and then we pay very low property taxes as it is, and until a home sells, its assessed value is well below market. Yeah, so that's actually probably our bigger issue. Real estate values here certainly are high, but it's a matter of what the assessed value is based on how long people stay in their homes. So again, California, we are funded on a per student basis. So every student that leaves our district, graduates from our district, or simply doesn't enroll into our district, every student actually generates a slightly different revenue figure. LCFF gives us different based on the grade that the student's in, whether or not they fit into certain categories that the governor deems as having particularly additional needs of support. We receive funding in a few different mechanisms, so we're just going to lump it all together and say the average revenue a student brings is $10,000, and that's actually a very, again, appropriate generalization. So one student leaving Matilaha takes with them $10,000. One teacher cost us approximately $75,000, and going back to that, every section's about $15,000. 5 sections gets you $75,000. So the reason declining enrollment is so challenging for a district is when you have 7 or 8 kiddos leave a site, theoretically the revenue that goes with them is the full value of one teacher. As I say up there, what do you do with the other 23 kids who are in that class? And that's, again, the biggest hurdle when in any declining enrollment district, and that's the narrative of why people ask, why is Ojai feel like we've suffered more or have had more challenging fiscal condition than other districts? It's because of the fact that we were once a 4,200 student district, and now we're 2,400 looking at 2,200. Declining enrollment is always more challenging to a district than simply maintaining, or a district that, Ocean View, which once was only 1,800 and now they're about 2,600, their fiscal picture is very different than ours for a few reasons, but one of the big ones is, if you're 2 districts, identical enrollment, if it was one came to it by decline and one came to it from incline, they're going to have night and day difference in what they're financially able to provide at the school. Okay? So, what I mentioned earlier, and again, Javier is going to go into the way that this will actually look at Matilaha when we see this continued decline. The really important piece is that, or one important piece from a financial perspective, is that we aren't looking at $150,000 increase in cost at this point. What we're looking at is if we become a district of 3 or a school of 325 students, we don't have a full staffing plan, but I'll just pick on one position. I assure you, we don't keep 2 admin as a 325 student middle school or a junior high school. Right now we have full-time assistant principal, full-time principal. There's no possible way we maintain that. And so we'd be looking at maybe a 40 or 60% reduction in FTE or of one of those positions. So that's what I mean by we're not looking at when Hank was doing his analysis of $150,000, he was looking at Matilaha being a school of 500 and likely staying somewhere in that range of 500. So if you added 225 or 250 more students there, became a school of 750 students, you might need to actually hire a counselor or hire 0.2 or 0.4 additional admin. And so that's why 3.5 years ago they were looking at actually being a true new expense, whereas what we're looking at now is if we go to 6th grade being at Matilaha, we simply don't have the reduction in admin time there. And the same thing would hold true when we, again, look at Javier's slides and other positions like many of our classified positions. If we go down to 325 students, we can't possibly maintain custodial at the current levels. We can't possibly maintain nutrition service at the same levels. So there's going to be reductions that would come that may not fully be realized if we were to have 6th grade move.
Yeah, we have a slide that shows the specifics of what the things will look like with a simple proportion. So I guess the obvious conclusion that we can draw, and excuse my voice, I didn't mean to influence the school for about a week now. Okay, that's what I'm standing here saying. So the obvious conclusion that we can draw is that obviously the less number of kids, less number of everything that we're gonna have, right? Less electives, less staff members. In our single subject that was discussed earlier, teachers are gonna be stretched thinner. We do have a few teachers that hold not only one single subject teaching credential, they have either math, for example, math and music, or English and social studies. And those are the teachers who really will be, in a sense, suffering the most. As we become smaller, it becomes harder to build that master calendar and trying to keep the math teacher just teaching math. Okay, so that's just one thing that we should keep in mind as we're looking at these. So here's what we have at the moment. With about 406 students, we are able to offer exactly 11 sections of electives. So again, doing a simple ratio, what would that number look like if we had 325? Well, that would look like a reduction of 2 electives. One from 11 to 9. So the question then becomes, right, what goes? Does the music department take the hit? Does our elective will take the hit? Right? Does our graphic arts take the hit? We've taken pretty big hits over the years. When I came to Matilda, my favorite class, because that's the only class that I understood what I was doing, was woodshop.
I still have a table in my,
There you go.
the
Okay.
woodshop table.
Well, that's an example of one of the things that we have to get rid of because we just couldn't maintain it. And the teaching staff, right now, 7 or 15 regular education teachers are teaching 2 or more subjects. And like I said, the smaller we get, the more of an issue that's going to create. And the other thing that we got to keep in mind is not only will teachers who have several single subject credentials will be teaching several subjects, but also we got to look at the possibility of sharing teachers with the high school because the high school also has single subject teachers. And that obviously creates a situation that is not really ideal for anybody. Having a teacher on one side teaching, say, social studies in English is one thing, but having a teacher at two sides, I think it creates a lot more stress for that individual. As you can imagine, being at 2 different campuses at once is not an ideal situation for
You have 2
anybody.
different bell schedules.
2 different everything, 2 different everything for sure.
But
Yeah.
just to be clear, if we were at 325 within 7 and 8, and then brought over 6th grade, that still doesn't answer that question that we were talking about earlier about single subject versus multiple subject teachers, about whether we were to at least begin this by having them in a hybrid context where they have a single teacher for most of the time. I mean, it wouldn't be, it doesn't seem like it's a clear line from, oh, you just brought in another, whatever, 300 students. Now everything just makes more sense. I mean, you still have there's some serious issues about how you staff that from
But I think
a
that's
teaching
the key
perspective.
question is, once the decision is made, what is that gonna look like?
Yeah.
How are we gonna go ahead and move forward with, are we gonna have, like I said, a school within the school? Or are we gonna go ahead and integrate the kids amongst
Right.
the population?
But I guess my
That's
point
really
is,
key.
when you say that, when you suggest that bringing the 6th grade would alleviate some of these concerns, for example, single subject teachers not having enough kids to teach, there's a presumption built into that those 6th graders then become part of the population that are now being taught by those single
Sure,
subject.
yeah.
So that's part of the answer, the decision is already sort of being made, if that's what we're looking to do.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
So then elementary school teachers would be affected.
Well, that would, certainly if
It's-
that's.
It's either right from the get-go, depends on what we decide to do and what it's gonna look like, or at some point, if we decide it's gonna take 2 or 3 years for them to actually be integrated, that's the approach that we wanna take. I think at some point, that will become an issue.
What
Yeah,
is the
the-
state
so
requirement? I mean,
teachers-
look at like Sunset, right? They're 7th and 8th, those teachers are multi-subject teachers, I guess, because there's only 2 of them.
I don't know.
You can teach with a multiple subject credential, you can teach up to 8th grade.
It's K through 8.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So it depends on the model and whether or not it's a standalone classroom or single periods. But you also have a lot of ways to get supplemental authorization, and we actually do have quite a few teachers that have the ability to teach in secondary with some sort of supplemental authorization, as well as the potential to take a test, the CSET, to get the subject
equivalent of a credential.
equivalency that attaches to your multiple subjects. So we will have to analyze all that and figure out what our teachers currently have and what are the best potential outcomes. Those are kind of second steps
Exactly, yeah.
after we decide what's the model going to be. But there are a lot of
But-
opportunities.
So
And to
some
be,
other options.
there is also the reality that we're beginning on the front end of what we keep hearing is a retirement bubble. I know that no one's stated an interest in us considering this possibility to take place for this coming school year. But certainly if we did, we have enough vacancy actually this school year at the elementary level that it'd be very close to being able to have any teacher that wanted to stay at the elementary level be able to stay and just simply fill the vacancies, and have Matilla teachers be able to pick up the classes there. So if the concern was to have a standalone program at sixth grade because we don't want to impact our current staff, which I think would be a legitimate concern, again, we know that there's going to be a lot of retirements and vacancies coming up that could help us absorb those changes.
We can
Without
recruit
actually-
the right
Without
new
actually
staff.
without actually having elementary staff who are being laid off to be able to maintain Matilla.
So if someone wanted to add the supplemental, what's kind of the cycle time on that? How long does that take?
Not necessarily very long. It kind of depends on how much expertise they have in any one area because they really have to gear up to take the test. And the test can be very rigorous.
It is very rigorous.
Yeah, so
A year?
again, if, not necessarily, again, it kind of depends on how much expertise you have. Like I think you were saying you were a history major, right? So,
So I didn't have to do anything.
yeah, you didn't even have to, did you have to do the
No,
CSAT?
it's back in the dark.
Yes. But like, now
There
if
wasn't
you,
as much history.
like I was a single subject Spanish teacher. Let's say I had a multiple subject credential and I knew Spanish because I majored in Spanish. It would be relatively easy for me to pass the CSAT because I have all that expertise. I'm not going and studying something new and different, right? So it kind of depends on how much expertise our teachers currently have, the ones that have the multiple subject credential, how much prep work they would need to invest to get ready for the test.
That's
So
what I
Javier, most of our middle school, our junior high teachers right now are not multi-subject teachers?
Not most of
No,
them.
they're single subject.
That was just our choice in hiring, but we could have hired them.
No, because of the structure.
Because you said, because it's K through 8 is the way they get their
No,
credential.
but if we have,
Or it's 6 through 12.
Mm-hmm.
Single subject can teach 6 through 12. Multiple subject can teach K through 8. So there's some overlap there because it depends on the model. It depends on if it's a K through 8 school where the expectation
And
is
the
to do
setting and
standalone
everything.
classes or a middle school model. But I do want to reiterate, we actually have quite a few teachers in the district that have multiple credentials. You'd actually be surprised. Lots of teachers that have single subject and multiple subject, or single subject with lots of different
and that's how
authorizations.
I got my math credential. Because I didn't have a math credential. I was on an emergency credential for a year until I decided that's what I wanted to do, teach math. And then I went ahead, and the options were go back to school and work on your credential for 2 years, or take the CSAT.
Mhm.
And I decided to go ahead and take the CSAT in math. So that I ended up taking a course to review the material. With an engineering background, the math came pretty easy. So that was a process of about, I want to say, 3 months
Right.
for me to take the CSAT and pass it, and then that gave
And
me
you
that
had it.
credential. Yeah. Mhm.
Oh, we're all into the humanities.
I do have to say though, I do have to say, I went and took the CBEST, right? And that was I took it, I didn't prepare, I passed it, that's not too bad. And then I went with a same mentality to take the CSAT. CSAT passed it, oh my God.
It's pretty hard.
I failed it the first time. I failed it, it took me the second try, the second time after taking a
So
course,
once
then I
you
passed it.
pass that, does that affect their step and column at all, or no? I mean, like if you have a
Wouldn't
master's, you get more
wouldn't affect step and
pay.
column. It would affect the factors that go into the ultimate layoff list. Multiple credentials can,
Seniority.
yeah, the seniority list.
Multiple credentials have a seniority.
Over people in the same year.
It's a good thing to have for sure. Our next slide shows again, using a sample ratio, what impact that would have. Right now, 406, we have 2 administrators, like it was mentioned earlier by Andy, and then if we go down to 225, I've been doing a sample ratio, that would impose that we would be at about 1.6 in administration, and the same thing follows for everything else, which is custodian, kitchen, librarian, in our office.
Can I ask a
And again, that's
question?
just using a sample ratio, yes.
So assuming that all the 6th graders go, could the reverse set be then modeled
Yes.
at all the elementary campuses are losing custodial, kitchen, administrative, office, library?
So there's a difference between losing 25% of the student population that Matilla is currently looking at, and elementary losing 14%, which would be what you'd be looking at with having slightly less than 1/7 because you still have TK as well. But yes, there's no question that as our classes, regardless of the way in which it occurs, as our schools get smaller, we are going to have to be making some challenging decisions on staffing levels.
Makes sense, right?
I'm gonna ask a really naive question in fill out a form. Why has the K-8 model never been looked at or considered? Where we could fill up our campuses, we could have a staggered start time for the junior high kids.
We did talk about that.
2002, I think.
Well, in this committee, we talked about it, remember, we investigated Kate, because then you're splitting up all your single subject teachers and having even less collaboration across the board for everybody. So you might be, so you'd need a math, science, social studies, every single subject teacher on every elementary campus to do 7th and 8th.
There's also significant facility factors. Again, we talked about the value in the middle school, the expectation of science classrooms. We have to actually invest significant money in building those. The gymnasium, being able to offer for both standalone PE as well as for extracurriculars, having a gymnasium at Matilaha versus all of our elementaries currently without. So some of those factors. Obviously, I think that we nailed it as far as the lack of collaboration. A big issue is right now, the challenge at our elementary level is that we have such small cohorts at individual sites, is that we're having 5th, 6th combinations. That's only going to continue to exist if it were a K-8 model across the district. You'd have every 7th grade and 8th grade being 7th and 8th combo. So now we don't have single subject teachers teaching it, and also they're having to teach multiple grade levels. So I think that one of the realities is with how small our cohorts, when you divide it by 5, it becomes really challenging to actually have standalone 7th or standalone 8th.
And I'm pretty sure that was the big cost at Sunset in Oakview when they went K-8 was putting in the science labs so that 7th and 8th graders actually had a place to do that science would be cost prohibitive at 5 campuses for the if we took it all to elementary level.
Yeah, it's interesting on that K-8. I didn't see a lot of curriculum associated with K-8. Is there much? I mean, that would change a little bit, wouldn't it? I guess not, because they're all at the same place. Anyway, I was thinking so much
like in math,
curriculum
I haven't
yeah.
seen a whole lot in math.
It seems a natural, like, I agree, because I thought I was not part of the committee, but that's one of the questions I asked back then, was why not K-8? If it's successful at Sunset, and if it's what parents are, if parents are worried about the emotional part of middle school, why can't we pull that? And then you actually got parents of younger elementary kids going, wait a minute, I don't want 8th graders on this campus. It's already the 6th graders are a little difficult to handle. So, but I had not thought about the science element of it and the gym.
You have more?
I have a couple of more slides, just how the change would affect the feel, just how the campus will feel. Obviously, a much emptier campus. Fewer options for kids to connect with one another, and believe it or not, back, when was it, 10, 15 years ago maybe, Matilaha used to have close to 750 students.
Oh, yeah. Barbie Rice,
Yeah.
our director of HR, talks about when she was office manager there, they were at 750.
750, and to just think that it could go down to 325, I mean, that's unbelievable. So we already struggled to try to get parents to be part of the Matilaha experience with the school site council and PTS, et cetera. So obviously having less kids means less families, means less parents that could potentially get involved.
And that goes to you're on your way in, you're on your way out.
Yeah, exactly. And as far as athletics is concerned, we currently have roughly about a quarter of our population participating in athletics. In a reduction, again, a simple proportion, right now, if we went to 325, that would mean that we would have about 80 students that would participate on our athletic program. Well, 80 students, I mean, you go to some of those competitions, I'll tell you from experience, take my daughter to the cross-country meets, junior high cross-country meets, middle school, and some of those teams have 80 kids in their team. It's like the size of our whole entire athletic department. For basketball and wrestling and cross-country and soccer, which is what we offer in volleyball at Matilaha, whenever we go to the competitions, it's kind of it's kind of cool to see that other schools incorporate their sixth graders as part of their teams. We played against Las Colinas in basketball last week, and we, for the lack of a better expression, we got killed. All right, and but you know, you look at their team, you look at the size of the school, you look at how many kids are in their program, and how they really have built an amazing basketball program, because you know, they incorporate their sixth graders, and it was interesting and yet sad at the same time to see that in the last quarter they were winning by so much that they just put the sixth grade team to compete against our varsity team. You know, so you know, you have the way I look at it is like you having a Division I program, right, competing against like an NAIA school, right?
But that's not gonna
Private
change, I
college.
mean, my kid's who's 22, the same thing, anytime you went outside the
Yeah.
valley, you just got destroyed.
Adding our sixth graders to the team is not gonna help us win.
Though it is interesting, and this is totally off topic, so I'll just drop it and run, but I think our high school really needs to look at recruiting and making athletics a really important part of it, because that's gonna bring students also, that's part of that selling, you know, if you have St. Bonaventure for years was taking football players because they had a great team. You know, so you create a team in a particular sport or 3 or 4 sports, like the music program does. You get kids for the music program. So let's start marketing those things and making sure that we're giving them the support they need to create.
But that's part of the benefit of getting the sixth grades there. We might not win more games, but we'll be able to start working with the kids, getting them excited about it, and that does build, just like the music program. We've got kids leaving sixth grade who already play an instrument and are on board because they've got the fundamental skills. So the earlier you can build those teams,
The earlier you can
So-
engage them in
Yeah.
those kinds of activities, the better of a culture you're going to build at your side.
absolutely that
I'll
part.
throw
as well.
out my one little thing is that my personal opinion is that athletics at the middle school level need to be no-cut athletics, that sixth graders coming in need to be able to play. Those kids all should be able to play, and I would love to see, I know that's difficult because of volunteer prospects, but
Well, we did pull it
I'm
off in
putting it out
basketball,
there.
just so that you know, as far as cutting off, there were so many kids that came out, and we were very lucky that we had enough volunteers that stepped up to the plate to be able to have 6 basketball teams. So we're always looking for those opportunities, but it does take, it takes a village,
volunteers.
right? It takes a
Right.
village. It
No,
takes
I
people to
understand
volunteer
that.
and kids being willing to do that, so. So that's the last bullet is something that you already talked about, and that's the number of clubs that we have. And again, a simple ratio right now, currently we have about 5 clubs, and, you know, we reduce it by 20%, it goes down to 4. And again, the less people, the less students that we have, the less opportunities, the less options, the less of everything we're gonna run into that as an issue. And I think that's all I
Thanks.
have.
So is that the end of the presentation?
That's the end of the presentation.
So I really want to give anyone in the audience an opportunity to speak now, and that includes people, teachers and other people who have been involved, but anyone, we're really here tonight as a board to kind of take information. We'll maybe have some comments at the end, but for now, we're really interested in hearing people's perspectives on this.
Well, to chime in, when this conversation took place.
I'm sorry, Tris, can I have you come up, because if people are watching at home, they won't be able to hear you.
They're watching at home.
Or when they watch this weekend, if they have time.
Seriously, someone did watch one time.
So I do recall very vividly when this was actively being discussed, and we ultimately decided to table it because of the finances, that the primary concern for my parents at San Antonio and Summit was the fear of having their beloved sixth grade child or children at the junior high. And as the dialogue went on, that really played a heavy role in the discussions. After it was decided not to move on that, and people had a chance to really just think about the conversations and the pressure was off, then I'd say that eventually the tables turned where those parents who had been so vocal at the time, their children did go as 7th graders into Matilaha, and they saw that they didn't get eaten alive, everything turned out just fine. And I think they did conclude that their child, as a 6th grader, would have been fine. So those were the primary concerns right then. I've seen a lot of pros on looking at having the sixth graders go to Matilaha. And so that was basically it. I just wanted to share that perspective from days gone by.
Thank you.
Does anybody know if anybody has looked into this topic, if a district has been a middle school district and then went, whoa, that didn't work, and gone back the other way?
I'm not familiar with
Anybody
this.
heard of anything like that happening? Okay, just
I
curious.
actually heard it the other way. Junior high becoming a middle school, bringing in the sixth graders, and everything was fine.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I got plenty of those stories, yeah.
There was, some of this stuff that Hank had passed out that had, the models and that they were predicting a possible swing back. Because there were, in some instances, there was, the sixth graders were there was more disciplinary issues with sixth graders who were in a middle school than sixth graders who were in an elementary model. And that also the basically, standardized tests, sixth graders in the middle school were not standardized testing as well as sixth graders who were in an elementary school. So I would say we would need to look at new statistics for that and see if that has changed. Obviously, our testing has changed a lot with the Common Core and all that.
In those years, we didn't even have
Right.
any data.
Yeah. But I would, that is one of the concerns, because I, looking at the board or dashboard that we just looked at, our sixth graders are doing significantly better than our seventh and eighth graders. And I know it's not the same cohort, but if you look at the math success and the ELA success, and I don't know if it's because they're spending more time on it at the elementary level, and that model would be maintained if they were brought to the middle school.
Or if it's just the cohort.
Yeah, so there's, future things that if we're gonna keep going, let's look at those two issues. And the third thing being we had some great speakers come for those committees. And one of the things I remember feeling was they had middle schools and we had a junior high. So there is something that changes in the middle school, and I think, I truly have faith in the two administrators there, that they could do it, but it would be work. The culture is different, the feel of a middle school is very different than a junior high. And I don't know that right now even the changing in every 6 different periods and all that. And Cheryl, I'll just point out that also among the materials that they were looking at, once we do that, we would like to change the start time to 8:45.
Bring that up to our start time committee.
That's in there.
Yes, please.
Well, and I guess to answer my own question, I would argue that Sunset did say there were enough parents in the Oakview area to say, we don't like that model, we're going back, and created a K through 8 model as an example of going back the other way.
My name is Amber McPherson. I have 2 kids in the district. They're both at Topa Topa. I have a 6th grader, so regardless of what happens right now, that's not going to affect him, so that's not why I'm here. But I also have a kindergartner, so obviously, changes would impact him in the future. I went to Matilaha. That was my first year here. I graduated from Nordhoff High School. I'm currently a teacher at Santa Paula High School. I've been teaching for 16 years. I'm a union vice president. I have a lot of different lenses to bring to this conversation, extensive work with our HR department and induction with credentialing. So I feel like I can look at all angles here pretty accurately. This is the first I've heard of this. I'm not saying things didn't get sent home back in 2014, whenever that was, because that was several years ago and who knows. But I did get an email, through Topa Topa's website about this particular meeting, which is why I'm here. And to be honest, coming into tonight, I didn't really have my mind made up one way or the other, but my 2 main concerns were, okay, there has to be some curricular pedagogical reason, and I hope they're going to convince me of that, and here I'm going to hear that in the presentation, of the need to move 6th grade to the junior high. And then the other thing was cost. And so I feel like there's a lot of information that was presented. I think that the more that information can get out to the community for the people who weren't able to get here by 5:30 tonight, information's good. And I have a lot to process in my mind about, all of these different things that were presented. However, one thing I do feel, and I think Kevin brought this up a little bit with regards to this shift and this declining enrollment. I see the declining enrollment as something kind of completely separate. Declining enrollment is happening, it's been happening here for forever. If the cost is, I think somewhere it was around $10,000, like reduction per student who leaves our district.
Right.
I think that needs to be tackled in and of itself. I know a lot of people who I didn't grow up here. I moved here going into 8th grade. I know people who were born and raised here and, went to all the schools and whatever. And their comments to me are, and I'm a public school teacher, so obviously I'm a public school advocate, but you're gonna send Aiden to Matilda? Yeah, like, why would I not? You're gonna send them to Nordhoff? And we face similar things in Santa Paula with kids going to Bonnie and whatever. And I think the issue on retaining kids is an information campaign, not just at recruitment for athletics, but recruiting our kids to stay in our district. And we do wonderful things here, and so that just needs to get out. I feel like that's a separate issue, because I think to put them together in this presentation is a little bit misleading, because it's going to be a shift. You're moving 6th graders to junior high, right? And then potentially, it was mentioned over here, that we could be seeing those combo classes or the negative effect of that on the elementary school campuses, right? As opposed to just looking at it like, oh, we're going to shift these kids and all of a sudden there's going to be this solution. It is a shift, right? I mean, if you're taking from one, robbing Peter to pay Paul, it's still not recovering the students. Obviously, there's a lot of factors of reasons why there's declining enrollment. But I think to be fair to the issue, it's kind of like you need to separate them out. To me, it's a lot clearer. Looking at the enrollment projections is helpful. I mean, certainly I know that, I don't know how many kids were at Matilda when I went there, or Nordhoff, but I know it was more, I mean, we all know that. But I think really honing in on the curricular piece, and to me, being in I am on the teacher end of it, and those logistics, those details, those credentials, I've heard a couple times, like, we don't know what the model would be, right? We would make the decision to move. I would really recommend kind of looking at a couple of models and making mocks of those and figuring out what that would look like, because I think the details actually may lead to a better informed decision, right? And it may make people feel less like, boy, I don't know what this is going to look like. Wow, we just did this and now we're going to figure it out, as opposed to, here's our models, this is what we're going for, and I feel good about that, and okay, this makes sense. Because of course the community has to be sold, right? Parents, myself, right? We all have to feel good about this. And like I said, I'm leaving feeling tonight feeling much more informed, but there's still a lot of information to process, right, about and a lot of valid points. And I see it from a secondary perspective, but also the parent at the elementary school. So I just wanted to share my thoughts about that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Angie?
I'm Angie Janassi, and I'm here just not. I just want to address the point about the teachers and shifting, and I have to agree with you. I feel like if you're going to make the decision to move, I think it would be important to understand what the model is before you make that decision and put it out there, because it's not a simple thing to go get another credential. And it's also a mindset of shifting. And what I've heard from a lot of 6th grade teachers is, well, I don't want to leave the elementary. And that's what I went into teaching to be, was an elementary teacher. And that's a certain kind of teacher. And so just to assume that, the 6th grade teachers are going to want to move and they'll be fine, and they can get their supplementary credential and it's not a big deal. It will be a big deal to them, and I think it's really important that we take that into consideration when you're looking at the models. And then also talking to them. I mean, they're the ones shifting, possibly, and I think having the conversation and collaborating on what that model might look like, and having the conversation with you guys so that they have input and some say, so that they might say, you know what, it's worth it to me. I think this is going to be exciting. And one teacher recently said, well, what do you think's going to happen? And I said, well, I have no idea. Go on Thursday night. Don't leave me hanging, right? And they said, well, I guess I'll get a prep period. And I said, well, not necessarily. You may just be sixth grade over there at Matilaha. And then their comment was, well, what's the point then, right? So I think that if we want to shift that and shift our numbers, then I think we really do have to have the conversations with them so they understand the point and get a say, and it benefits them too to move. So they, like Mr. Ondo went, but all my mother hens, what will I do without you? There aren't mother hens at the junior high.
Well, we'll find some.
I said, no, you'll be fine, Chris. But you see, I mean, he needs that. So I feel like we need to make sure we consider all of those things, make sure they're included, because you never know. Someone like me might say, I want to move. So.
Well, and I'm trying to think across the board. Are all of our elementary male teachers at that 5th, 6th level?
No.
No. 'Cause I feel
No,
like
we have third grade teachers, male third grade teachers. Chris is sixth grade.
A notable retirement recently.
Right. So anyway, so that's all.
I just love to, I would hate to see us have no male teachers at the elementary level.
No,
That's.
I know, I agree. But then you never know, there might be people who say, I really would love to do that.
Right.
And Chris wouldn't have to leave. So, it's just, but I think all of that has to be taken into consideration so that people have those options, and it can be something that's exciting if we do it, not something that people feel is punishment.
Which is, I think, what we've talked several times, even about when we were discussing elementary closures, is you don't just say, we're gonna close one, you have to make going to the other school exciting. So there's like, yes, I'm sad, yes, I'm upset and disappointed, but I also hear they have a real science lab there, or they have so there are some things that are communicated that make it exciting. And, I hate to say, it's like the Hydra, you chop off a head and you get two heads, but I start hearing some things that make me say, gee, remember when Hank mentioned having San Antonio be a K through 2 and then having all the 3rd and 4th and 5th graders that, you get that collaboration, you get that, all those things, and there's so many, it's kind of opening up a can of worms, but I certainly think it's worth hearing more, and I agree that I think the model we need to know what we're deciding on before we decide on something.
Well, also, you mentioned middle school versus junior high. If it is shifting to a middle school, then maybe that's part of what you have to do, is shift the name too. I know that's like, it's the junior high, but you know what I mean? I mean, it's a mindset. You're changing.
Uniforms for PE because I don't want to buy more.
Well, you've got the M alliteration.
Does anyone else? So the public comments are still open. Does anyone else have a comment they want to make?
I was just wondering if there's any timeline that everybody
So we will now, when all of you have spoken, we will then start discussing it. But I just want to make sure we cover anyone who wants to be heard. And if not, we will then close the public discussion. Oh, no, I said it, close it.
My name is Rosa Razo, and I work in the district. I'm an aide for special ed, and I also have a special ed child. And my concern is my child going into Matilda when she's not even ready to finish what she's doing right now at her level. She should be in second grade, but she's still in kindergarten. So as a parent with that concern, I'm worried. So have you considered that?
We will, and thanks for mentioning it. And I
I'm
certainly
like
understand why you'd be concerned.
petrified. I have a sixth grader, no worries. If she would have been in that right now, it wouldn't affect her because she is above her grade level in my eyes. But with my special needs child, I'm worried.
Albert, could you just tell us a little bit about the special classes at Matilda or Carol?
Well, we offer
I
She
know,
actually knows
I know.
because she worked for
I was
us.
there.
That's it.
Oh, okay.
I've known this one for many, many years.
Hold it, did you guys work this out ahead of time?
We kinda did.
But as a parent, I'm still worried.
Yeah.
Our special education teachers actually came to us when we were talking about this and said, we wish we could have those kids for 3 years, because we have a individual program, a class where they go. If we could offer them that for 3 years in a row rather than just 2, they felt it would benefit the special education.
Yeah, you told me
Cheryl, I
that.
sent you that.
Yep.
Right.
But that's why we're having this meeting, so you can tell us that,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
I'm worried, I'm worried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Sure.
So, this was a while ago, and I have to just say that I don't remember it exactly. Didn't go back and look at the notes, but I do remember that part of this conversation was adamantly built upon the fact that 6th grade teachers would have a choice, and that it wouldn't be the direct result of layoffs of 6th grade teachers if they didn't move. So I just feel like I have to put that out there. That was why we kind of got to that point of agreement that it could be a great thing. I think we all pretty much unanimously agreed that it would be a good educational opportunity for our students, but not at the cost of losing elementary teachers.
Thank you. I'm sure it's not even, anyone else? So we will then, and by the way, even when we're talking, you can certainly chime in. We just have to formally close, I believe, the public comments aspect. So now we can talk about it among ourselves. Anyone like to start?
Well, I think a lot of really important points have been brought up tonight that we need to get some information about. And I think special ed is one. There were several. The impact on teachers, and not just some general thing about, everybody's gonna be okay, but to go teacher by teacher and see, are you gonna be better at the elementary? Do you wanna go to the middle school? And find out what the details are before we make a decision.
And how that affects the elementary level,
Yeah.
what happens if you lose that extra grade on those campuses. But I think tonight, this is information, there's no vote or motion, but I think the question becomes, do we want this more information and want to continue talking about it, or have we heard enough that we feel like, yeah, well, they closed it in 14 and we're not gonna reopen it? Isn't that kind of what we're
Yeah,
deciding?
and I think the process, I think I can speak for all of us and say, I don't think there's any way we would vote to do something like move 6th grade over without a full detailed blueprint of exactly what was gonna happen. So I wanna reassure everyone of that. The question is what more information we might want. I totally agree. I think the special ed component, I was actually thinking recently it would just be nice to have just an update on that overall in the district.
Sure.
Anyway, anyone else?
Yeah, I'm still interested in the idea. I have to agree with what you said, if there's a pedagogical benefit, and I'm seeing that, I'm hearing it from the instructors. The collaborative potential seems really cool, leveraging of our facility resources, because we only have one junior high, and or middle school, whatever, and it's where all of our kids go, and so the weaker it gets, the more all of our kids suffer. So to me, keeping a really strong middle school, junior high, whatever you want to call it, is important. But yes, I'm very sensitive to stepping off without having a parachute, and so I think it's important that we know specifically who potentially would be impacted. I think we're small enough to be able to map it out person by person.
Absolutely.
That I would be comfortable, once we got to that stage, then I think I would be comfortable making some kind of a decision. But yeah, I think a little bit more detail in terms of how it would play out, and the idea, I'm really attracted to this transitional hybrid model. Again, just because I think there's so many uncertainties and so many emotions around this and there's no rush to do a full transition, it seems to me. If you have have them insulated within Matilaha to begin with, and we have experience in how that works. We're still getting the shift in population. We're still leveraging our facilities. So I think there's a way to do this, to gain the pedagogical benefits, to keep Matilaha vibrant and the programs existing. But I do want to know what it's going to do to our instructors and the potential to the elementaries, because we just got off of a really awkward conversation about that, and this is pulling more people out. So I kind of worry about that.
Which in terms of timeline, I mean, obviously it would help if we knew what the next cohort of kindergarten is in terms of those numbers, and I know, I mean, right, I mean, are you
don't-
trying to decide by April or May? I mean, obviously, no matter if we decide in May or we decide in August or September, I mean, we're not deciding for the 18-19 year, or are we?
Well,
It's up to us.
I was not assuming that there was the possibility of 18-19, but theoretically, could be.
There's so much that goes into sixth grade and that transition that, yeah, thinking about it for next year, those fifth graders who are not right now assuming that they are,
Right.
I don't see that being possible. I don't see that being fair.
I agree.
I think one thing that ought to be said, though, is the way, and when I first heard about the idea, I had a lot of concerns, and there's still some questions that I have, but the way education is going in this county, in the state, in the country, we're the only district that does it the way we do in the county, and we're becoming one of very few. I think the conversation is going to have to go from, why are we doing it? Instead, we need to defend why we're not doing it. I think that's the real question going forward.
The funny thing is, I've always, Thane and I talked about the fact that we both were junior high school guys, 7th, 8th grades. I do.
For ninth.
I was 7th and 8th.
I was 7th.
Oh, so I'm not your friend anymore. I thought we'd had the same experience.
It wasn't gonna last.
But I do wonder, there's a part of me that wonders if there's an aspect of this that's like and I've said it before, but like the town that says, everybody else has a Home Depot, man, but at some point, the town without the Home Depot becomes the special town, At some point, maybe 7th and 8th grade is kind of a cachet. Maybe there are people around Ventura who, with no choice of a 7th and 8th grade, decide to come to us because we're exceptional in that way. So
I think that used to happen, Kevin, but once Sunset went K through 8, there were a lot of kids from Oakview who used to come up because we were 7-8, but now that Sunset's a K-8, I don't think we get many anymore for that reason.
And one thing that's probably worth doing is doing what we can to kind of poll our parents and find out if, where they're at. I mean, it's always dangerous, of course, to turn any difficult decision into a vote because there's a lot of resistance to change that sort of is inherent. But I think I agree that we don't think that this is on a timetable that's where anything's going to happen for a 5th grader this year. That doesn't seem like, and I think I heard you guys say you're definitively against it, and I think I am as well. So that ends that. So that means that we do have some time to look at this. But that's an issue for me. I think, Jane, the point you raised about the test scores, we can't take that lightly. I mean, maybe, a little more depth in terms of what's going on with those cohorts, but maybe there's something we're missing about what's happening in the 6th grade that's not happening in the 7th grade. I definitely want to continue considering this. Today I thought was great because it was a really nice recap, and I think the objective information suggests it would be a good idea. But I also, understand what everyone's saying. It's a short-sheeted bed we have in our district. To say, well, let's put some more kids over at Matilaha means that your feet are sticking out at the end of the bed now. So what happens elsewhere? And I know it's a moving target, but certainly we can certainly if we were to really consider doing this, we'd want to fully understand what we're doing and then decide to do it. It wouldn't be, hey, let's figure it out in the future.
That's how the state does
Yeah.
curriculum.
It's how guys who went to 7th through 9th grade.
Well, and I would like to, because you mentioned, hearing from parents, which is very valuable, but I also think that emotions run high on topics like this, and that it's our job to not let emotions totally make the decision, right? We look at financial, we look at academic, and we look at emotional well-being of our children. So we look at all components. So we ask to hear from administrators, we ask to hear from teachers, we ask to hear from parents, and from the two of you. But I think it's important that the five of us end up weighing all those elements and determining what's best for, getting the highest quality academic.
True, but at $10,000 a person, if you alienate a lot of people without thinking you were going to, the cost to that could be catastrophic.
I'm wondering if there is a way to look at data. You've mentioned that disciplinary issues between 6th graders on elementary campuses are fewer than on middle school campuses. But I'm wondering and I don't know how you get this data, but what the other end of the spectrum looks like. If 8th grade who are in a 7th, 8th campus versus 8th graders who are in a middle school model where they're with the younger 6th grade, if that changes, if the statistics on disciplinary issues change for the 8th grader when we...
Well, I do have to say there is an asterisk to that point, is that it's possible, they said, that elementary school principals and students and teachers report the disciplinary issues in a different way than the middle school does, the middle school model. Because you're able, you're
Corrected, not disciplined.
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
Which is, again, goes back to my point of middle school versus junior high.
Right.
Can you take that, the way they're nurtured in a 6th grade at elementary, and nurture the entire middle school that way? That would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
For the 7th and 8th graders.
The thing that I take from work, right, all of our student success folks at the college district, and all the literature that they're trying to, because, getting kids to go to college, getting kids to think about college, getting them to prepare for college, and all the literature is saying that, we've traditionally been recruiting at the high school level, and they're saying, you need to start talking to the middle school kids. That's when they need to start thinking about it. And I went to K-8 because the nuns never let us go. And it was elementary kind of all the way through. My siblings went to middle school, junior high, and it was different. And to be honest, they had a little bit of trouble because it, at least back in my dark ages, the junior high wasn't as nurturing a place. It was a lot like high school, but smaller, right? It's like you just kind of were on your own. You took your classes, you walked the halls. If you were late, you flunked. But what I've seen here at Nordhoff is a different culture than that. And I think if we can do it at Nordhoff with the older kids, I think we can do it at a middle school with even younger kids. I'm very impressed by what I see at our high school. It's not, and I've seen high schools. I used to work in a project to teach collective bargaining and stuff, and I would visit LA high schools. And oh my God. They are, and even the best of the ones that I saw are nothing like Nordhoff. You don't get the sense of the spirit. You don't get the sense of the, I don't want to say civilized, but civil nature that I see. So I'm worried about it, and I think it would be a transition, but I also have a pretty high level of confidence in our folks that they could evolve the junior high into what you're talking about, a little bit more caring, a little bit more supportive environment as a middle school. But yeah, that idea of, preparing for the future, to me, seems like it would be helpful, so.
Well, and I think, you're mentioning aiming college discussions at that younger level. Some of our schools do that in sixth grade, and it would be great if that was an across the district thing, where they go out to Channel Islands for a field trip and they walk the campus and hear what it's like and why you would want to do that. But I'm not sure that all campuses get to do that.
Plus, I think, I mean, whoever said they have television, have smartphones too, and the internet. And I don't think sixth graders today are like the sixth graders that, we were kids. We were stupid kids.
Well, and
sixth graders today are not. We were. Other people I can't speak for.
But there is a different culture, I would argue, and you guys can correct me if you see something different, but I went to middle school. I was one of the first groups that in the Ventura School District when it first changed. And so it was still in the old model that I don't think they do anymore, where I had one teacher for the first 4 periods and then PE and an elective. And so I really only had 3 different teachers. Now I think they go the whole time. But it was a middle school. It was also, it was, the after-school dance was an after-school dance, and you set your backpack down and you're in your school clothes and you went and danced, and then you got on the bus and you went home. And Matilaha, they're pretty swanky after hours dances. It's a different culture. It's a different environment, and there's a lot that goes with that. I think we may actually be able to slow things down rather than pushing sixth grade to grow up faster. We could slow down 7th and 8th graders from growing up.
I think that if you have 2 cohorts, 6, 7, which was the former 5th and 6th, going together, the 8th graders, the only ones on the campus who you have a likelihood of doing that, of making it a younger, sort of sweeter campus, because you have a larger group coming together with that sort of.
I think that's unrealistic, honestly. I mean, especially now, so much of kids' lives are outside of school, social media. I mean, to think that just by putting 6th graders at the school would somehow, retard the rate of their sophistication, I don't think that's realistic.
So where to now?
Well, you guys have certainly given us a number of things to work on. As I began the meeting tonight, I said this would be the first in a series. We certainly know that this was to lay the foundation to make sure, again, that we appreciated and understood what was deliberated back in 2014. I certainly never had thought, nor did I presume that you guys would be approving anything that wasn't actually a laid out, very clear plan. So I certainly appreciate the comments that were made, and I echo and agree with everything that was said as far as having a very clear plan laid out before any of you would be ready to approve. So I think that we're still a ways away from obviously being anywhere near that plan. So you guys have given us some things to give you additional feedback on, and so I'm very confident that Cheryl and I can get that information for you.
So I think what we should do is have that information come to us in another meeting like this. We'll just set up another meeting whenever that time comes. We can hopefully get the word out more, and we'll do a little brief recap of where we've been and then take it from there.
Exactly.
And I think it would be important to hear what those models look like and hear what kind of teacher support or whether the teachers are interested in this as well.
Sure.
Before we poll parents or
I agree. I think we would need a really solid plan before we ask parents how they feel. I think we would need to lay out, this is what we're thinking about doing exactly. How do you feel about this? Rather than, hey, what do you think?
I would have to agree, because there's a lot of benefits, that even more so that I heard tonight, that I hadn't heard during the deliberations. And I think you can't just say, do you want to do it? Because Kevin's right. Change is scary just because it's change, right? So if you're going to ask, you really need to ask in the context of, here's what we see as the potential benefits, and here's what we see as some of the drawbacks. Now, how do you feel about it, right? Not just how do you feel about it in the abstract?
We've also had very little discussion amongst ourselves as to what impact this has at the elementary level.
Right. Right. I think that would be very interesting in terms of what does it leave in terms of the populations and economic viabilities now of 5 neighborhood schools with reduced enrollment. Is that a benefit? Do we have to do another 7-Eleven? You know, where does that leave us? So,
Anyone with anything else? Then we will end our meeting. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks.